So just before we get started, I want you to head over to serieachronicles.com/Patreon now and subscribe to the Chronicles Tifosi Patreon membership with a free 7-day trial. Get early access to every full-length episode and voice note before the rest of the world. Plus, all episodes are 100% ad-free. And you get bonus Patreon-only exclusive episodes, video episodes, and behind-the-scenes extras that include just, chit-chat, me and Nikki talking about David Beckham, pop culture, whatever you want. Also, be sure to join the new chat community in the Patreon app and chat with fellow subscribers. Hello, Nikki. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Mina. That was a very good read. I was very impressed with how smoothly you managed to remember all of the important parts that I would have forgotten.
Oh, Nikki. Okay, guys, I really want to talk about, because we come on here and we have all these chats before the show starts, and I always come in with a clear budget of time, okay, guys, we're going to give it 2 hours.
So true. Like, you come straight in and say, we've only got this much time. We can't run over today because I have to get off and do this thing. And then what happens, chat? I'm just interrupting me now, but what happens then is, having clarified that we've only got limited time for the recording, Mina starts telling me all about her favourite rom-com from the 90s.
No, Nikki, no. Yeah, can we just explain this a second? Yeah. Firstly, okay, we had started talking about the monologue that I have to do at the start. Yeah, and then Simon wants us to read, and halfway through, Nikki just goes, who would I pick for Italy to play if I could choose my favorite group for them to play? Yeah. So then she starts wandering around pot 1, pot 2, who could Italy's best opponents. And then obviously it just starts getting out of hand about why we call Italy and Turkey Turkey now, and all these different conversations. And I was saying, somehow, I'm not sure how, I'm not going to lie, but we've got onto the rom-com of Only You. Guys, it's a really old rom-com. It's my favorite one. I watch it about 5-6 times a year, in all honesty. I remember I had my boyfriend, actually, on our first ever trip, took me to Italy to retrace the hotels and the actual cities in that film,
so
because
sweet.
I know,
oh my
really
goodness, Mina.
it was like the only time I liked him, and it was I'm joking, but it was like a really. Honestly, I would have enjoyed it if it wasn't 43 degrees and I was trying really hard to just survive at that point. But like, in general, it was really sweet. But this film, and then Nikki goes, I've never even heard of it. And even Simon has heard of it. Even Simon watches it,
Oh,
Nikki, it's set
I'm
in
excited
Italy.
for it though, because honestly, like, despite having never heard of it, and I'm the right generation because I'm the same age as you. Like, I don't know how I haven't heard of this movie, Only You. But I think when you were a kid in the 90s, which we both were, sorry for aging us, Mina, but we were, like, there's like an era of just very gentle rom-coms that you hark back to a bit, that I feel like don't get made in the same way anymore. And when you watch some of them back, some of them you think, well, it's a good reason we don't make rom-coms like this anymore, because the messaging is absolutely horrendous. Like, some of the messaging in them is like, just make sure you shack up with the absolute worst person in the world who's like a narcissist and gaslights you and does all this stuff.
But as long as it's rich.
Right. But there's something about just sort of movies that you can just sort of, I don't know, relax into and not have to try, and you know where it's going to go, and that's great. Like, it's sometimes we all need that in our lives, and so I'm excited there's one that I haven't seen before that I can get to find now. So I'm looking forward to watching Only You, although I can't find it for free anywhere. I was just googling all the streaming services to see if I can watch it for free, because that's how we do all TV now. Is it free? Well, not really free, but am I already paying for it on a subscription?
We also had an argument about whether or not it started with a Ouija board. It's probably worth clarifying.
That's you and producer Simon. I don't know. I haven't seen it, but
I was talking, and then Nikki goes, "Well, here on this it says that it does start with a Ouija board."
Yes.
So yes,
I'll confirm.
So that was our conversation. Then we started trying to pick our favorite group that would. Oh, and basically, it's also worth noting, then we started discussing what we bought on
Black Friday.
Nikki's got quite a few like electronic shopping in.
I don't normally go in for Black Friday in a big way. I always sort of look at it and go, oh, I should get some stuff while it's cheap, and I never do. And I'm also always a bit suspicious about whether they're really deals or not, or whether people have just sort of done a bit of trickery with the prices. But my TV has been threatening to break. It's been making some sort of weird flickering. And it is about 15 years old. So I finally bit the bullet and got a new telly. And I've also bought a new computer because I always do everything off my laptop. And I thought, well, a friend who knows more about these things than I do told me that now you can get quite small desktops. And I thought, well, I'd quite like the convenience of not always having to use my laptop. It means I can have it ready to go places. And also, I think if you use your laptop all the time, you sort of run it down quicker. So I've got a nice little mini desktop coming that will fit into the nook in my desk, hopefully quite well. So yeah, I've done loads this year, Mina. Did you do I didn't even got to asking you if you'd done much Black Friday shopping.
I did, but I only did it for skincare.
Oh, I did that too. I mean, that's like necessary. Like, why would you not? Because you know you're going to use it, and like, why would you not? Yeah.
They were just really good offers on like cleansers and like all of those types of stuff. So I did all my beauty shopping in essence. Oh, and I did get a few presents for Christmas.
Clever.
Just because you might as well if they are 30% off, right? And I got a really good advent calendar. Yeah, so that's which shopping. Also yes, which even when I gift stuff to men, I also give them skincare. So, and then I write down the whole thing on how to use. Yeah, dude, your skin needs a bit of help. So this is how you're going to do it. And then I write down how they're supposed to use them because a lot of the times they don't know how to use them or they mix up. Anyway, I really feel like I want to start a skincare blog, but I just can't do all these different things and watch football. We should probably get into the football.
Imagine if football had a Black Friday. Like, imagine if all the teams, like, instead of having the transfer window, you reach like an extra like 1 day transfer window on Black Friday, and all the players are marked down by 30%.
Everyone would get Mbappe. Oh my god! Imagine that! Who would you go for?
Who would you like at 30% off? I mean, you want everyone at 30% off, don't you?
Yeah.
I wish I could get a 30% of my time back from that Derby d'Italia, Mina. There you go. I'll give you a segue to the game of the weekend.
Did you really not like it? I know that everyone said that it was really terrible, but I'm gonna be honest with you. I didn't think it was that bad. So I don't know whether I just got really heavily involved that I stopped noticing how bad it is, or.
It's really funny, Mina, you say that, because I was sort of tickled that you tweeted, I think, like just before the game. Maybe we're not supposed to call it tweet anymore, but I don't know how to say it if I'm not saying tweeted. You X'd, like it's weird. Like, but you tweeted before the game about this being like the worst Juventus team in forever.
Yes.
Which I don't fully agree with, because I mean they were really bad before Conte came in for a couple of years. But
how bad?
But then I thought they played some pretty good football in that first half. And I was a bit surprised by how dynamic and energetic they looked. I was expecting the classic Allegri low block, which it became pretty quickly, to be fair. But yeah, Chiesa obviously flashed a shot over. Really nice combination with Vlahovic for the goal. I mean, Vlahovic was brilliant on the goal from start to end of that move. And obviously then Inter scored a great goal of their own back. I thought the first half was quite entertaining. The second half was astonishingly nothing. Like really nothing happened in that second half. I think there was one shot, and not even a shot on target. There was one shot between the two teams. Maybe it was on target. Still only one shot between the two teams. And I think it was sort of predictable, and I don't really blame anyone for it, because there was this whole conversation beforehand, both the managers being asked, oh, would you sign for a draw? And even though they both said no, you look at it and you go, well, a draw does kind of suit everyone, right? It allows Juventus to say we're still in touch with the leaders. It allows Inter to still be in first, and they've got another good game crossed off the list. But I did think the second half was rubbish. I think some of the reporting, same as you, I mean, Gazette, I think, called it like the worst game ever or something. I think some of it was a bit overblown. The worst Derby d'Italia ever or something. But it wasn't great. The second half was pretty dull.
Okay, so I'm gonna challenge you because I said that it was the worst team ever. Not ever, in recent memories. And you said before Conte. So should we say 2009, 2010? What year would you like to go for?
Was a good question. Let's go for 2008.
Okay, damn it. I got 2009 up.
See, I knew what you were doing. You're like 2009. I was like, 1 year before.
Okay, fine. 2008, 9. Okay. Let's go.
But I mean, they were dreadful. They were dreadful late in that, right? 2010 was Del Neri, which was horrendous. But you just
Ciro
going to argue
Ferrara.
that was just purely Del Neri rather than the actual
squad.
players on the books. Yeah.
Well, think about it. Okay, hold on. Let's have a look at 2008 to 2009, which was a horrendous time. But they still had Giorgio Chiellini. They still had Gianluigi Buffon. I mean, they had a Mauri, so I get it. But they also had Del Piero. They had Nedved. They had Mauro Camoranesi. They had Trezeguet. They had Claudio Marchisio. They had Sebastian Giovinco.
Okay. Yeah.
Mohamed Sissoko.
Yeah.
I mean, I still think it's better than Caviglia. I feel really bad because I'm only picking on him. You can mention anyone if you like. You know, most of them are horrendous. I mean, Weston McKennie, who got relegated with Leeds, is like the star in the midfield. Adrian Rabiot, who so far has had one good season, still not considered it, but at least you say he can play for France. But barring really Chiesa and Bremer, I find it really difficult to honestly turn around and say this is a really great squad, you know?
It's tricky. So I'm now looking at Del Neri's squad, 2010, 2011. And yes, you've still got Chiellini, you've still got Marchisio, you've got Del Piero. But it's also about what point these players are at in their career. Trezeguet is there. There's players in there. Did Trezeguet leave that season?
He left in 2010.
Yeah. So that was, did he actually play at all that season? I don't think he did he?
No,
okay,
yeah.
Okay, I think he played one Europa League game before the beginning. So Trezeguet isn't really there. So yeah, some of those names sound good on paper, but they weren't necessarily at their height back at the time. And there are some players there who were on the downturn of their careers. I don't know. I think that the squad was pretty soft in 2010, 2011. But I take your point in absolute terms. In terms of the quality, you're struggling to name those star players in the same way. And it's interesting that when you talk about the player who did score for them, Dusan Vlahovic, that's the guy who should be the one that makes you feel excited. I mean, that is still your 70 million euro striker. I think he's the best played player in the whole league. And this was one of those goals that reminded you what he should be, what he can be. It was a brilliant goal. I mean, he earns it by winning the ball in possession, winning the ball in midfield to begin with. He makes that smart pass out to Chiesa, and the finish I thought was really well taken as well, because it's one of those you don't want to like put your foot through. You just got to open your body up and let the power of the ball carry itself where it's meant to go. And I think he scored a great goal, but I understand where you're coming from, that when you read that name, you don't feel as unambiguously good about it as you do about a Chiellini or a Del Piero or even a Marchisio. And even the other player who has been great recently and who is probably the one you want to be a star in this team, Federico Chiesa, you probably don't even put him at the level of Marchisio for what Marchisio did for Juventus yet, do you? So I see where you're coming from. I do understand that.
You know, it's really odd. So let me start this off by saying, obviously, it was a 1-1 match, 1-1 game, and played at Juventus Stadium. This was what we thought would be a fixture that was circled and underlined by Allegri because, you know, everyone remembers last year when he turned around to Inter and mumbled, "You're going to end up in behind us anyway," in the league table. And honestly, I looked at the starting lineup and I looked at the midfield, which had Caviglia because of so many absences. Obviously, we already know the long-term absences of Paul Pogba and Nicola Fagioli. But it was also Miretti was struggling with the lower back pain. So it was Weston McKennie, Adrian Rabiot, and Nicolussi Caviglia, who wasn't terrible. But you could see a difference when Locatelli did come on and actually could produce the vertical passes, the through passes. Just the overall passing ability that he has is so much higher than obviously what Caviglia had. Caviglia had only played 2 minutes before, made his debut, I think, in 2019. it's funny because when he came on, I completely forgot about 2019. I just thought this was an 18-year-old. And then he's like older than half the squad. So I'm like, okay. So I don't know what's going on here. Yeah. And everyone's like, oh, well done to Allegri to showing faith in him. And I'm like, the guy's like near retirement, like.
He's 23. Come on, Mina. Near retirement. How old are we?
Someone did
We're here
actually
talking
tweet
about
that.
movies in the 90s. The Mina's like 23 is haggard.
You know what? Because I follow a lot of these people that really hate Allegri, right? So I think it was like Tancredi had written something like, well done, this show's like, well done to Caviglia. And someone had responded being like, the guy's near retirement. and I don't know why, but it really made me laugh. Yeah. Also because everyone was like up in arms about, obviously, I forgot. Oh my God, I can't forget the Milan youngster that came on. Camarda, thank you. Yeah. Coming on at 15 years old, and everyone's like, this guy's only 10 years older, and everyone's like, well done.
That's ridiculous. You're right. It's 8 years difference. That is crazy. That is actually crazy when you think about it.
Yeah, especially when nowadays what 18 and 19-year-olds are doing, and like Bellingham and Gavi and Pedri and Musiala, you name it.
Well, not wanting to foreshadow a different game we're going to talk about later, but I obviously El Shaarawy scored again this weekend for Roma. And every time I see El Shaarawy, I'm surprised by how young he is because he's 31. I think to myself, you have been playing in Serie A since like I can remember almost. It feels like
I feel like ever since like Zlatan was like the biggest player in Serie A.
Like 2008 was his debut, which is forever ago. It's 15 years ago. So yeah, Camarda might be around making us think this in a decade and a half's time.
So Camarda was born the year that Shaarawy made his debut.
Oh God, that's a crazy thought.
It's almost disgusting.
Yeah.
I need to buy more skincare. So like, this is where it is. But okay, talking about the game. So I honestly looked at that midfield and I thought to myself, in all honesty, if Inter are as good as we think they are, and that they should be about 20 points ahead of this entire team, this entire league, I really thought that they should win this. And I do think it's more of a missed chance for them, even though it was in Juventus's home. But I thought Juve did a terrific tactical job, totally nullified Di Marco and Dumfries, and played this game in which they tried to negate their ability on the wings and just stop them in their tracks. And I feel like this is sometimes where I wonder with Inter whether, because a lot of their substitutions have always been sort of like for like. Is there a way that they can overcome that? Did they even want to overcome that, considering they have such a tough schedule ahead, with obviously playing in the Champions League now midweek against Benfica? They do want to earn top spot in that group so that they don't face heavy hitters like Madrid or Bayern. And then they have Napoli coming up in the weekend and probably thought to themselves, look, we showed maturity to get our equalizer. Do we really need to go much further ahead? I do think that you should have gotten much further ahead because they've got a heavy schedule after January. And I just think when you include the games to do with Coppa Italia, when you include the knockout stages of the Champions League, it's better now to have sort of padded out the gap between you and Juve. Especially with this midfield. Like, I feel like I could beat it. But anyway, but nonetheless, I thought Allegri did a terrific job. And
I think just to quickly pick up on that point, Mina, I think you have to like contextualize, or you don't have to, but I want to contextualize in like what happened in these fixtures last year, because Inzaghi even said that at the end, right? He was like, last year we played the same game and we lost. And over the 2 games last season, Inter had twice as many shots as Juventus. I think more than twice as many shots as Juventus in the 2 league games, but came away with 3 goals conceded and none scored. So I do think I understand not wanting to walk into that trap again and perhaps being more cautious as a result.
Yeah, I do get that. I also feel like they lost it last year because Lautaro wasn't this Lautaro last year.
Yeah.
And I think he is the difference maker. I know that we can talk a lot about the mistakes that were made defensively. And I agree that a foul should have been made if you can't stop somebody as brilliant as Lautaro. But he is the difference maker. He is turning what are potentially draws into wins. Rather potentially losses into at least a point, or even draws into wins. He is just that level of quality and a step up. But I don't necessarily think that on a tactical level they are hugely better than they were last season. I think that their mentality is better. I think that they believe in themselves a lot more right now. I think Çalhanoğlu has been performing brilliantly, albeit not in this match in particular. I think DeMarco has been an incredible player for them, but it's more based on how much their players have actually grown into their roles, which obviously helps, and that has a lot to do with what Inzaghi is doing as well. But I can't help but think that if I was an Inter fan, I would have been really irritated. As a Juve fan, who's the best coach in the league? I do think it's him. Like I love him. Like I do sometimes get angry with Allegri because it really is like not exactly the most exciting brand of football. I did enjoy Paolo Di Canio, who said that he is the anomaly. We're in a world where everyone tries to go forward. He's like making sure that we have to go backwards if we have to secure the result. But he is the guy that knows how to shut teams down. He is the guy that's making the most of what he's got. And it sort of just reminds me when Juventus had to play. It's not obviously of the same level. Real Madrid at that stage were just ridiculous. But when they played Sturaro in midfield against Real Madrid in the Champions League, and I just thought this is going to be 7-0. And we won. And I don't know. I guess that obviously this is not the same level. It was just a draw. But I really didn't see that coming. I really did see an Inter thrashing. So on that level, maybe because I was so pessimistic that I'm overjoyed at what happened eventually. And it makes me believe in this team. But I would still like to see this Juve against better technique, teams that are much more outgoing going forward. Because this is where I worry. Because against a Sassuolo, against, I don't know, a Kvaratskhelia, I still worry that this Juve side could concede 5, as they did last season.
Yeah, I mean, just first of all, Mina, asking who the best manager in the league is, and I had to bite my tongue not to say Thiago Motta, just to see what the reaction
That's true.
would be.
He's been pretty
well.
good.
Yeah. But I think you could definitely make a case that Inter didn't control the game as well as they would have done. I think you're absolutely right that Allegri had a good game plan in shutting down the two wide areas for Inter. And Inzaghi said it was not a surprise that they did this to us last season, but the fact that he's able to still do it with modest talent, and it is modest talent that Juventus are working with in several parts of the pitch, is impressive. I think that part of the reason that Inter are ahead of everyone in Serie A and why I still accept them to win the league is because the individual talent is that little bit above. And obviously Lautaro is Lautaro. I thought it was a brilliantly taken goal again. I think if you look at where he starts his run, he's tussling with Gatti. Gatti's got his hands all over him. He drops back and then he times that run to the near post. But it isn't just about him in this move. I thought Barella actually had quite a quiet game. But that one moment, the moment he comes across and plays that one-touch pass onto Thuram, unlocks the goal. And likewise, Thuram, who's been brilliant, does his own brilliant work on that goal. And in terms of are they better than last season, same as last season, it's hard to say. And I think that we'll really see at the business end of the Champions League. But I do think Thuram is so different to what they had up front last season. I think Lukaku and Dzeko were both very effective at certain times, and they offered quite an interesting diversity in terms of what they do, because they weren't the same kind of player despite physically having similar heft, I suppose. But Thuram is different again to both of them. Neither Lukaku nor Dzeko is going to get on the ball and dribble like he does, and so I think it's definitely a different question that opponents have to answer now. So I don't know. I think the draw in my mind really did just suit both teams. And as you know, I predicted on here that Juventus are going to win, so perhaps I came in with a different set of expectations. But I enjoyed Luigi Garlando and his piece in Gazzetta, where he was being scathing about the game, but in quite a funny way. But he also said at one point, he described Juventus, I can't remember his exact phrasing, but it was, to paraphrase it, as the crocodile lying waiting in the water, and if you go in and take a drink, they're going to drag you down with them. And that is quite a nice description, I think, of how that low block can feel. It's come on, come forward, walk into us, see what happens. And when Chiesa and Vlahovic are as good as they can be, as they were on that combination for the goal, it does change the balance. And so perhaps when we talk about individual talent, that is part of this picture as well. Yes, Allegri is doing a really sort of smart job of making the most of his resources. They have been very defensively robust for a team that doesn't have many remarkable players. I do really like Bremer. I think Bremer's a great defender, but overall they're not sort of standout talents. But what makes them dangerous is they can play that way and know that actually when that Chiesa-Vlahovic partnership is working, it's quite a scary counterpunch. Like that's not something you can ignore.
It was interesting because I was reading what Ultimo Uomo, they were very critical of Juventus last season. And they were talking about the fact that they were critical largely because the statistics were telling them that Juventus were overperforming last season. They were getting clean sheets when they didn't deserve to. Their defense always looked like it was going to be hit quite hard when they faced better talents or faced better teams. And we saw that happening. We saw even them being destroyed by the likes of Maccabi Haifa. But that this season, they're actually a lot better statistically. And that they do sort of force teams to take shots from outside because they don't consider those shots to be ones that could really terrify them. So it's about how they play the game in the sense that, go ahead, have a shot, but inside the box, you're not going to come anywhere near us, and just the way that the team is playing right now just is playing with a lot more of sort of intelligence. A third of the shots that they create do come from set pieces. So, this isn't based on like wonderful patterns of play, but just making the most of just getting little wins. I mean, at least that's what I wrote in my column. Was I was saying that I do feel like what Allegri focuses on is getting as many small wins on the pitch as possible to make it one big win. But there's still a lot about them that irritates me. And it's funny, even the goal, because I do think Vlahovic needs a little bit of love, because I think he's been heavily criticized, and I'm somebody who did heavily criticize him and probably will continue to do so if he doesn't keep this up. But I thought what he did for the goal deserves a lot of applause. And generally speaking, his mobility, his willingness to just come back and get the ball and try to play it forward, he was just a lot better than I've seen him play. And Allegri actually called it the best performance that he'd ever seen. Federico Chiesa was just a magician for Italy. And yet, even when he was delivering the assist, it's just this head down. I mean, finally he put his head up just to cross it in time, thank God. Yeah. But there is just this part of him that he can't really shake that part off. And I feel like it will, and again, he missed a great chance, and I'm not going to get on his back, because every brilliant player in the world misses many, many great chances. Lautaro missed 4 in a Champions League game, but it is that great chance. It is another great chance for Italy that sometimes, he doesn't take. And I do think he is of that level where I expect a lot more of him than I would expect of any other player, because I do think he's that much better. So I am going to be much harsher in my criticism of him. But I do wish that he plays just a little bit more with his head up. I think he was great in the give and go, obviously, like delivering the ball back to Vlahovic. And he is somebody who always scares you when he's off, especially when he's playing a little bit further out wide, which he seemed to be doing on this occasion. But I still think this is the team that has a lot to learn going forward. So I want to see where they are in February. I'm dying to see where the team is in February, and whether or not they will heed some of these lessons and grow as a unit. But it is a real shame that there's no Pogba and Fagioli, because I just think this team could have been so much better.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some. When we talk about the big names in those past Juventus teams, you put Pogba in this team, and the reputation changes things. But
yeah,
I mean, he's not been present since they signed him really in any serious way, has he? So that one's probably less directly sort of impactful in my mind than Fagioli is, who perhaps we did expect to be playing quite a prominent role this season.
Yeah, unfortunately for them. Okay, let's move on to, unless there's anything else you want to say, but feel like we should.
No, only thing to say, actually, one observation is that having drawn this game, and you were just saying interested to see where they are in February, and I thought Allegri's words at the end about building consapevolezza, I'm not going to say it, building self-awareness, why can't I speak today? I can't say the word. Consapevolezza. There we go. Can't say words. But he talked about building that self-awareness by being second for a long time. actually, Friday night away to Monza, Juventus can go first, only for 2 nights, because Inter play on Sunday, but Inter play away to Napoli, so it could be longer. So a real chance for Juventus to put some pressure on. The league table doesn't matter too much right now, but again, that thing of building self-confidence is perhaps meaningful.
Yeah, Monza destroyed Juventus twice last season.
Yes.
That will be interesting to see, because Juventus at least won over Inter last season, whereas Monza turned into monsters against Juventus. So I'm interested to see how that game goes, for sure. But also, it was the first match of Napoli under Walter Mazzari. I don't know. Did we actually discuss what his return meant for Napoli at the time? Because I don't think we went into that, because obviously everything happened with Italy and the national
Well,
team.
you were missing, and Patrick and I spoke
Ah,
about it a bit. Patrick had some sort of
yes,
some memories and thoughts about Mazzari. He's such a fascinating figure, Mazzari. Yeah, we did talk about him a bit on that last one. I feel like when you and I used to do ESPN shows with Gab Marcotti, Mazzari was like Marcotti's number one player to kick. Like, he really loved sort of laying the boot, manager to kick, the number one person he loved laying the boot into, and we all did to some extent. I think Mazzari at times in his career has retreated into sort of almost like a parody of defensiveness, but at the same time,
is he the guy who
somehow.
has? I was going to say, is he the guy who has cameras on his mother, or was that Spalletti?
No, that was I think that was Spalletti.
Okay,
It's not. I don't think that's Mazzari.
mm-hmm.
But the but what Mazzari often is fantastic content. I mean, he's hilarious on the sidelines. He's always so dramatic. I remember sort of, these gifs. Still get sent gifs and loads of him sort of biting bottles and things. Ultimo Uomo did a great rundown of all the best gifs of Walter Mazzari, and it's quite a compilation. He's a character. Whether or not he's a good manager for Napoli, I don't know. But it was an encouraging first game back, and I think almost as sort of poignant as the game, which Napoli won, an important game away to Atalanta 2-1, not an easy game to win. But it almost felt like what was as significant was right after the game, Victor Osimhen posting a bunch of pictures of himself in a Napoli shirt again. And of course,
Whoop, whoop.
Osimhen took down all the pictures of himself after that whole TikTok debacle. And the TikTok story is not directly linked to Rudy Garcia, right? Like, it's not actually like Rudy Garcia who's in control of Napoli socials while he's manager. But it just felt like that was symbolic of new manager, new win, new start. You know what I mean? Like, it's like Osimhen is sort of taking this opportunity like everyone else to say, okay, let's hit the reset button and start this season afresh. And if you're starting the season afresh with an away win in Atalanta, it's a pretty good place to start.
Yeah, a lot has been said about Atalanta and their home record and the fact that they hadn't conceded any goals until Inter came. But when you looked at the teams that they did play, they were all teams that they should have beaten quite comprehensively anyway. So against the bigger teams, we have seen them stutter at home, even if it's a 0-0 against Juventus. But Inter defeated them. And then I was interested to see how Napoli would play under Mazzari. I thought the first half, they were very, very good. Very good. I especially liked Kvaratskhelia performance, and I think that he's the player that we haven't necessarily always seen the best of. But I do think even under Garcia that we saw a lot of brilliance from him. But him in particular was wonderful to watch. Him embracing Mazzari at the end of the game, I think, was a brilliant gesture too, because it seems like everyone's on board with what's going on. It's almost a bit like, bye Garcia, like, we like this one, we can keep this one. Yeah, so I don't know whether that means something, like you said, with Osimhen in his pictures and with Kvaratskhelia hugging him. I feel like at least they feel somewhat more in sync with this particular manager that has gotten quite a little bit of praise actually from a lot of the press. I thought a lot of them would be like, oh, this guy again. But he got a lot of press for the way that he's so passionate about his job, that he's so almost coming onto the pitch to try to tell them to press, always very concerned with his team, with his players' emotions. The way he spoke about Anguissa was very sweet as well. But then the second half came. I thought Atalanta were very good. I thought Pasalic had potentially one of his best games. I always like how much Hatterbo can give to this team. I think he's quite smart in the way that he'll be like, okay, this is going to be hard. Like we've got to keep pushing forward so that we can nullify their ability to come forward. But yes, I thought that Atalanta were also unlucky not to score more goals in the second half. I did want to ask you something actually, because there's obviously this whole thing about the goalkeeping situation at Atalanta. And I had lots of people being like, well, what did you expect from Musso? He's a terrible goalkeeper, and everyone's like, you've got to give Carnesecchi a go because all these great goalkeepers think Carnesecchi is a real one. And then he's since taken on
straight away responsible for the goal. Yeah,
responsible for this one. He's been responsible for a few errors, but he is a kid. And I thought it was interesting because Gasperini didn't want to sort of,
sure, guys. When Caviglia is 23 years old, Mina says he's close to retirement. When Carnesecchi's 23 years old, he's a kid.
Because in goalkeeping years it is. In goalkeeping years, you could be 45 and still be Buffon. So that is a difference, okay? But yes, you're right. He's not yet close to retirement, like good old Caviglia. Come on, it's the funniest tweet you would have read. When it was, he's like, come on, this guy's retiring. Anyway, God, I can't imagine. When I was 15 years old, I was discovering what it was like to go to the body shop and buy stuff. And this guy is like in San Siro. Like, it's just crazy when you think what 15-year-olds are doing these days. But anyway, so I think their goalkeeping situation is interesting, not to say the least, because Gasperini was very quick to say, like, stop asking me to replace Musso. They're going to make mistakes, and then he does replace him, and then we've seen this isn't the first mistake that Carnesecchi's made. But either way, I thought it was a really fun match to watch, in all honesty. I thought that it was, good appearances from different players, Kvaratskhelia, but Osimhen coming on, so good. He's, no mask though. There's a part of me that's like, I forgot what you look like. And so it's so weird to watch him without that mask. It's almost like a whole new Osimhen, right?
Yeah, I know what you mean. It sort of challenges you. You're like, I think for me, it's more that feeling of like something's not the same. Something's not the same. Oh, wait, yeah. Like it takes a second. I think it's so easy to read too much into one game, right? It's one game of football, and the winning goal, as you say, it's an error by Carnesecchi and a moment of that sort of rare Osimhen. One of the many things that makes Osimhen such an unusual and brilliant player is he's got those go-go gadget legs, and he manages to reach that ball at sort of full stretch, and that creates the opportunity for the goal. I mean, they are though, aren't they? When you watch that goal, it's like he wins that ball, and you think no other player on the pitch reaches that. But I do think there are some signs that you look at and go, okay, that's interesting. They went back to building from the back. Actually, after scoring that early goal, it was quite a sort of cautious football, which is not a surprise to Mazzari. But I think in some ways, it was getting back to principles that suit Atalanta that perhaps have been lost. I think you and I talked about this a few times with Garcia. It felt sometimes like he was almost trying to bypass the midfield, especially when Osimhen was fit, and just look for those long balls up to Osimhen, which was always plan B for Spalletti, not plan A. Whereas I just felt like watching this game, okay, this game is all about, really for Napoli, it's all about Lobotka again. And that's how the team worked under Spalletti. It's all about Lobotka, and it goes from there, right? That's your orchestrator in the middle. And of course, the winning moves are all about Kvaratskhelia, Osimhen, Politano, whoever's up front. But you need that control somewhere. And I think that under Garcia, it felt like that core idea was maybe not lost, but certainly not as sort of firmly held. And maybe Mazzari is just bringing things back down to, all right, let's get back to this thing we did really well, or you did really well before I got here, I suppose. I think he's not going to be the next manager to lead them to a league title, but I think this was a really encouraging start just in terms of what he's supposed to do. He's supposed to be a traghettatore. He's supposed to be the ferryman to get them to the end of the season. And I think that this was a very positive start in that ambition.
Yeah, I also like the way that basically I think what they needed was just somebody who, to be a really successful coach after a very successful coach is a difficult thing to do. And
Yeah.
I always feel like Allegri and Inzaghi did a good job following on from Antonio Conte in the sense that they didn't change too much, but just slowly started to introduce different ideas. And ensure a different, like a more flexible team, if you like, you know. But it's not like Allegri arrived at Juventus and thought, yeah, we're going to be done with all of this and this is just terrible football, I'm going to start from scratch. No, he took everything that Conte did, you know, stuck with it for a bit, and then slowly made it a different team. And I think that's what Inzaghi's built, a very good team, taking on from Antonio Conte as well. And I just feel like taking on from Spalletti when a team is has such good chemistry with its players, amongst its players, and the ability on the ball, and just the balance overall, especially in midfield. I mean, to nullify somebody who was so brilliant like Lobotka from last season and just almost leave him with no control of the midfield was really weird, to be honest with you. So I sort of like that what Mazzari is doing is like, yep, okay, so they played a 4-3-3. I know everyone keeps talking about me being famous for a 3-5-2, but I'm going to just try to do as much as what Spalletti does, because I don't, you know, I'm trying to get them to something that seems familiar to what I saw from them on TV. That's what he said. And I sort of appreciate that about him. How much and how far he can get, I honestly don't know. But I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of excited to see them against Real Madrid. I don't want to go too much in that game, just because Madrid are missing Vini Jr. They're missing, you know, Tchouaméni and Camavinga. They've got a lot of absences, and I think this is a perfect chance for Napoli to do something really good that will help them, not just from the Champions League point of view, but also from their confidence going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's asking a lot, but if they were to win at Madrid, then that means they don't have to get a result in the last game against Braga. So that's, you know, on the table. They might not need to get a result from the last game against Braga anyway, because Braga have to get a result against Union Berlin to even make it relevant. But they are at home, so most likely that group is going to go down to the final round with Napoli needing just a draw against Braga. But there's an opportunity here, and it's kind of a free hit because Real Madrid are going to win the group regardless, almost certainly. But it is kind of a free hit this midweek round for Napoli to see if they can get something unexpected.
Should mention that Olivero got injured, so they don't actually have a left back available to them. I just wanted to ask you something about Rahmani's goal. I mean, I was incensed. Like, yeah, it is like, this cannot be the offside rule anymore. There is no clear, like, there's got to be daylight, surely. This, I don't know. It just really bothered me. I get it. It's a sort of semi-automatic offside, but it was so slight that I'm just like, really, this is not going to count?
Yeah, I understand completely where you're coming from, and it is what it is. It's semi-automated offside. I wonder if we will get to a point where people want clear daylight and that to be the rule. The only problem is, of course, wherever you draw that line, there will still be marginal decisions. There will always be decisions that are right on the edge of, was there daylight or not, if it's not this. So
this is really like hairline, and it's just, but I get it. I mean, but I still feel like we need to move towards the actual intention of the game and what, you know, offside truly is, and this isn't it.
Yeah,
but
I saw a headline, which I haven't read the articles, which is always a dangerous thing to do, but I saw a headline from the Telegraph this week saying that only a fifth of fans would like to get rid of VAR, which surprised me a bit. I thought it'd be much more than that. So perhaps, I haven't read that article, so I should say maybe the survey is more ambiguous than that. Perhaps this is one of those wording of the question issues. But if that's really true, then I can't see automated offsides going anywhere. So, yeah, that's.
I don't have a problem with VAR. I have a problem with the rules. Otherwise, I don't have a problem with semi-offside. I have a problem with it being like
enough offside.
Yeah, like your nose is a bit bigger, so you're going to have to be, you know, like that kind of stuff, you know, or like an armpit or whatever it is that they, you know, we've seen ridiculous decisions before. But luckily for Milan, they managed to achieve a win, just to set them up just in time for their matchup against Dortmund, defeating Fiorentina, who've had a torrid time recently. This Fiorentina are just this conundrum, or like this enigma of a team, because they create, I mean, I'll set the scene. They didn't score. They had 3 shots on goal in the first half. and they had 18 in the second. Okay, 18, and they have no striker that can convert any of these opportunities into goals. Obviously, it doesn't help when you've got Mike Maignan managing to rescue his team with his face, because that was a spectacular save that he made when the ball hit his face and he managed to keep it out, because that would have been a definite equalizer for Fiorentina. But I do worry about them going forward, because I think they play such good football and they're just let down by the strikers that they have. And even their former striker, Jovic, for Milan, was just a disaster as well. So anyone who seems to play for them in general, other than Vlahovic, has been pretty rubbish for a while, you know? And it's a real shame, but Milan played a good first half, I think, despite the fact that they had missed Giroud and Leao for this game. But in the second half, do we need to worry about Milan?
I think we have lots of reasons to worry about Milan. I think they were lucky to win this game because they weren't brilliant. As you just said, Fiorentina had heaps of chances, and I think they're desperately sort of crying out for a true number 9, which Lucas Beltran perhaps isn't. I obviously, you could likewise say, look, Milan have not had Rafael Leao for this game, but there's a lot of not cheap talent on the pitch when you're talking about Pulisic and Chukwueze and well, Jovic was free, but still, there's players on the pitch there who you think should be able to do a little bit more. I'm not still sold on how Milan are playing. I don't think Pioli has fixed the underlying things that have bothered us about this team all season. But it's better to win playing badly than it is to lose playing well a lot of the time. So good to get the win going into this game against Dortmund. Unfortunately, it's a slightly sort of tricky time for us to do this episode because we're recording on Tuesday, and by the time you listen to this, they may have already played their game against Borussia Dortmund, which is absolutely pivotal in that group and in that season. I was looking, and sort of technically they can draw with Dortmund and still go through, but it's really unlikely. So they really do need to win at home to Dortmund. And
they have to go to Newcastle.
Yeah, exactly. And
St. James's Park, yeah.
And if they haven't beaten Dortmund, then they need help as well from the other results, regardless. So they really do need to win at home in this one. And they have to win without Rafael Leao, and they have to win against a team who actually quite like playing the same way they do on the counter-attack. I think it's going to be a fascinating evening. But yes, probably shouldn't spend too long dwelling on it, just because by the time people listen, they will have already seen that game.
Yep. I just wanted to ask you something. Maxime Lopez, is he better than Arthur in midfield?
Maybe. I feel like you're asking that question because you have an opinion on it.
Well, when I'll be honest, I'm a big fan of Maxime Lopez, but I guess we haven't seen the best of him. I thought he was brilliant for Sassuolo. I think that in general, with the style of play, he was very pivotal for the team. It comes to Fiorentina, I really thought that would be a huge step up for Fiorentina to have him in midfield. And then Arthur started to pull off some really good performances, and I was like, oh, look, Arthur's back. Never really believe in Arthur all the time, right? And then in this particular match, he comes on, and I just feel like Fiorentina just had so much pizzazz with him on the pitch. He was just better capable of sort of taking the game by the scruff of the neck and really like pushing Fiorentina on. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I'd like to see a little bit more of him because he is a player that I really like.
Arthur's more of a ball winner in my head, and perhaps Maxime Lopez, you're getting a bit more creativity as the trade-off you're making, and sometimes you're going to choose horses for courses, aren't you? But I think Lopez has only had one start this season, so I can definitely see your argument for giving him more of that time on the pitch.
It's funny because Serie A is obviously our favorite league because we talk about it so much and we watch it so much. And then you look at a lot of these players and you think if they were just a bit better, would they still be in the league? Because it's like watching Nico Gonzalez have like 75 shots and it's a little bit irritating to watch because they're all like flying everywhere, and then you've got like Paredes, for example, for Roma, who's good on the ball, but not fast enough, right? So it's like if he was just that bit faster with the way that he directs the ball, could they be better? Like if Dumfries was just less technically awful, would he still be in Serie A? It's all these little sort of things that you look at Serie A where it's like a lot of good players, but just not there yet to be at the very highest level. And I just feel like it makes me a little bit sad. Let me put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, the unfortunate reality is that any of those players are perceived to reach the point where they are
Perfect.
elite in every category, then Premier League teams will want them, and Premier League teams can mostly get what they want these days. There's always a few they can't get everybody, but they can get most of what they want. And there's only a few teams initially that can really defend themselves against those sorts of bids. And even those, it's often a struggle, right? Inter, we've talked plenty about their financial position, and yet they are still trying to, and confident at the moment they're going to get a new deal for Lautaro, which would be huge. Napoli actually just turned a profit on their most recent accounts of about 70 million euros, which is huge. You should be able to say when you're returning 70 million euro profit that you can dig in a bit. And we know that De Laurentiis doesn't sell his assets cheaply, but there's still going to be a price for Osimhen and Kvaratskhelia. There's always going to be a price. So it's just a tricky reality of modern football, isn't it? That the Premier League has a level of wealth that nobody else has.
Yeah, it is true. And I guess it's the difference. You have like the near perfect players, like Barella, and it'd be essential for Inter to keep Lautaro Martinez, and I think both of them are secured at least. I'm interested to see that if Federico Chiesa just pushes it that bit forward, how many teams would come in for him. I mean, they already are coming in for him, so he's on another level of talent. But
I think everyone's probably waiting to see if Chiesa can get through a season healthy, which
that's
is
the other thing.
Yeah, the tricky part for him.
Speaking of healthy players, I think we should talk a little bit about Lazio and Roma. Roma had a great win against Udinese, who I thought was going to be a tricky match for them because Udinese are that type of team where you never quite know what to expect of them. I mean, they were rubbish to start off, but under Cioffi, their performance has really picked up. And I really wanted to see what was going to happen in this particular match. They managed to recover, Pellegrini, like their attacking lineup with Pellegrini, Lukaku, and Dybala playing all together. Al Shaarawy coming on. Bove coming on was really brilliant. I thought he made such a difference in midfield. All in all, I've never seen Roma have 70% possession under Mourinho, so that was very impressive from them. And yeah, when Udinese got the equalizer, I was like, well, you see, this is what happens because Udinese are just that team that can scare you even when they've been rubbish. But Roma did very well to sort of recover themselves and make the right substitutions and just ensure that they got the win. Dybala particularly having a solid game. I wanted to ask you this because I don't remember who it is. I don't know whether it's Paolo Di Canio or Christian Vieri, but someone had come out, and I'm sorry, I don't remember, had said something about Roma only have themselves to blame because they've chosen to go for these injury-prone players, whether it be Renato Sanchez or Paulo Dybala, which is why they were able to get such high talent. So they can't, at this point, complain when they don't have those talents available to them day in and day out to perform. This is just them. I mean, they have the third highest wage bill, so we should be expecting them to push on. And question marks remain as to whether or not they've made the right decisions. Is it better to go for less talent that's always available to you? What is the American saying? The best ability is availability. So, but of course, then Dybala comes on, even if it's not in every single match, and then can do that. And you think, I mean, for Roma, he's the difference maker, right?
Yeah, I mean, the goal, it was a great team goal, actually. Everyone was who was involved in that goal did brilliantly, including Bove, who we were talking about just before we came on. Producer Simon, very in love with Bove at the moment, thinks he might be getting ahead of Pellegrini in the pecking order, which I'm not sure I'm ready to go with on that one just yet. But it was a great cameo from Bove, who came off the bench and played really well. But in the end, it was a touch of class from Lukaku. It was this real veteran.
It's true.
I know how to do a lot with a little touch from Lukaku, and it was a finish from Dybala, and that is to pick up what you just said, Mina, it kind of follows on from the conversation we were just having. The best players in the world are not going to be at Roma right now. Dybala, if he was healthy all the time, would not be at Roma right now, and he'd have a price tag on him of no less than 60 million euros if he was healthy all the time, probably more. But he's not healthy all the time, and so they were able to get him for free, and that's its own story. So you have to roll with the punches with that one. When you've got him, you've got a world-class talent who's been a Serie A MVP, who is a reason that you went to the Europa League final last season, but then in the Europa League final you didn't get a full 90 minutes out of him because he was coming back from injury, and he scored a goal in the Europa League final and was great, but almost that game encapsulated the whole issue, and that's a reality for a club of Roma's current means. You choose your path. Either you deprive yourself of that talent or you accept you can have it, but only part-time. I think I understand the frustration for fans and for the manager seeing that and knowing what you can have. But he wouldn't be there if he didn't have these injury issues. He'd probably never have left Juventus, but if he had, it would have been for a big whack of money.
Yeah, that is essentially true. His ability on the ball, Lukaku, has also made a big difference for Roma going forward. In general, when you look at Roma, when they do play the way that they played in that particular match, you think, can they make top four? They should make top four. Right? Who would drop out?
I don't know about should. Right, because Inter are ahead of them. Juventus are ahead of them, I think, in terms of where they are. Napoli are the reigning champions, and of course we're waiting to see how they reestablish themselves now under Walter Mazzari, but talent-wise again. So then you're talking about Milan as the most vulnerable, maybe. And that's a team that were champions of Italy a season and a half ago. So it's not straightforward to crack into that top four. But winning this weekend has certainly positioned Roma back in fifth, has put them back in that discussion. And I think at their best, they're capable of muscling into it. But I don't think you should say they should, because the teams that they're fighting with for it are all good teams.
Yeah, are very good teams. They are actually level on points with Bologna. Thiago Motta really doing a terrific job. So maybe you're right in saying that he's the best coach in Serie A. Meanwhile, Sarri has been questioned after that terrible loss to Salernitana, who are under Pippo Inzaghi. Salernitana managing a 2-1 victory over Lazio. A lot of the questions being asked of Lazio is why they don't seem to be the team that they were last season, either defensively or collectively. They sort of play in streaks. They're good for 20 minutes, but then they're just terrible. And this can't just all be down to Milinkovic-Savic. Maurizio Sarri talked about the fact that he just doesn't feel that right now they play with character, with the right mentality required to really win these matches. I mean, this loss was so bad for them that they are now in 11th place. They are behind Frosinone. I mean, this is shout out to Soule. But yes, it's remarkable to me that they are a team that will probably get to the knockouts in the Champions League, and they're 11th in Serie A.
Yeah, I don't want to tempt fate for them. Again, we're recording this on Tuesday. They've got a big game against Celtic in their Champions League group, and if they win that, they're going to be in a very strong position. But nothing is done yet. In fact, that game's kicking off really soon because it's the earlier kickoff. But it's fascinating if it does come to that, because Sarri has always been this manager who seemed almost disdainful of Europe when it's been getting in his way, when it's the Europa League or it's the Europa Conference League. But with it being the Champions League, obviously having to take it a bit more seriously. if that becomes his saving grace and the league is his downfall, that would be a fascinating reversal of his traditions. But I don't know. It's got to the point where Latito is having to do the manager is not under threat conversations with the press. We're not talking about firing him. And as soon as your owner is having those conversations in public, it's at least on the radar, right? Even though they might be saying the right things. I think the fact that this game was won by Antonio Conte obviously is a little extra salt in the wound. 36 years old and still doing it against his old team. But I'm not at all convinced by their trajectory under Maurizio Sarri, if I'm being honest. I think one way or another this is likely to end up being his last season there. The question is whether or not it's a full season.
It's funny with Sarri because there's sometimes he says things that I just think are just hilarious, and then there's other things that he says that I do agree with. When he talks about, for example, how the Coppa Italia is now, and that it's just a servant to like big powers rather than a cup that is enjoyed as much as the FA Cup is. And when he talks about why Serie A is not like the Premier League, I agree with a lot of what he says about the pyramid. And I can't make my mind up about Sarri because I think that he speaks a lot of sense. I think that he gets emotional about something. Yeah, and I would really be upset if he's not around. I do really enjoy him as a coach. I think he's a terrific coach. I think he's such an adaptable coach. And yeah, I've always liked watching his teams play, so I certainly hope that he sticks around. On the games,
he's to be clear, he's 100% right about the Coppa Italia, which now the best clubs in Italy don't even join it until the last 16. Right? It's a ridiculous competition.
Ridiculous.
It's a silly tournament. And I think I've always said this with Sarri. What made him feel like such a good fit, what makes him perhaps still such a good fit at Lazio, is that I feel like that's exactly speaking to their fan base. Their fan base is the one that's always considered itself counterculture and to sort of think it's constantly highlighting the hypocrisies in football. Now, the ultras also do all sorts of horrendous things in the name of that and using that as an excuse for things that in my opinion are inexcusable. But that is very much the identity of that fan base, and so he speaks to it very well. But if the results on the pitch don't improve, then I can't see the Tito tolerating it forever.
Who would they go for? I mean, this
is a good question. Who knows?
Another news about who could go for. There's news emanating right now that Conte is signed and confirmed for next season, and I can't help but think
this is for Juve.
Yes. Not Lazio, no.
Yes.
Sorry, because we did just jump. No, for Juventus. And I mean, other than the fact that I want to pull my hair out in general, I do feel that this comes at a terrible time. I don't buy it, but this kind of rumors for a collective team that right now is doing so well, that has this great unity within it, I think it's a very destabilizing piece of news. And so it really does irritate me when we discuss these types of things. I only mention that because he is obviously a great coach who is available. And so everyone's questioning whether or not next year he could be at Napoli or next year he could be at Juventus. If Sarri goes, who would go to Lazio? Lots of question marks about the merry-go-round. But in other news, just looking at the other scores that are worth mentioning, Sassuolo played a very goal-heavy game against Empoli. It's 3-4. Cagliari managed a 1-1 draw against Monza. And obviously, as I also mentioned before, Bologna under Thiago Motta are just this incredible force, as are Frosinone, who got a 90th minute goal and the winner against Genoa. Soule got their first one. What a spectacular play he's turning out to be. Verona and Lecce 2-2.
Just to say on individual players as well, Mina, right? And because Motta is doing a great job, but Joshua Zirkzee scoring again in that game, I think he's really quietly developing into something a little bit special here at Bologna as well.
Yeah, it's for somebody that I wasn't quite sure would ever really get there. He's really jumped up in quality under Thiago Motta. Motta's just done a really terrific job, because I thought that he would do really well, and then I watched that opening game against Milan, and I was like, oh, I don't know. Do they have enough going forward? Especially losing Arnautovic. But this is shockingly good for a team that you would never have imagined would be as up there as in the position that they are right now. So maybe he deserves a big team. Maybe we should give him the Napoli job. What do you think?
I think Motta, I know he was one of the candidates, because De Laurentiis has talked about it. Has talked about him as one of the candidates for that Napoli job. I wouldn't rule that out in the future. Again, Mazzari is there as a traghettatore. He's there to get them to the end of the season. Now, obviously, if he does brilliantly, he might manage to persuade De Laurentiis to extend them. But I think Motta is definitely on Napoli's radar.
Yeah, I'm scared that he's waiting for PSG. But
Maybe.
I think that's all we have time for. What do you think, Nikki?
I think that is all we've got time for. Just quickly, I'll mention the other European games. I think we've mentioned Milan, and we've mentioned Lazio's games in the Champions League this round. Obviously, on Wednesday night, Inter go away to Benfica. They've already qualified, but they do still want to finish ahead of Real Sociedad in the group. But probably that will be decided in the last game, so not such an important one away at Benfica. We have mentioned as well Napoli going away to Real Madrid. That's the Champions League games. Europa League fixtures this week. We've got Roma away at Servette and Atalanta at home to Sporting. Fiorentina in the Conference League are at home to Genk. We'll have some voice note updates through the week on how that all went. We did have a very quick chat about the Euro 2024 potential draws. The draws itself is going to be on Saturday, so we'll have time to talk about it. But Mina and I were eyeing up the different pots, and I think we said maybe something like Belgium, and then either Albania or Romania, perhaps from pot 2, and then either Slovenia, Slovakia, or Czechia from pot 3 might be our dream draw. We'll see, because there's some horrible draws in there as well. Worst case might be something like France, Hungary, Netherlands would be pretty bad. So we'll see. That's all coming out on Saturday, so we'll have that to talk about next week as well. But for now, thank you all for listening and for supporting the show. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. All links are in the show notes. And we'll see you next week. All right, guys. Bye.
Ciao.
Serie Chronicles is a Media Chronicles production.